there, desert discoverers! Welcome back to Musicland Stories, the origin point for all music and adventure stories in the known universe, and some of the unknown ones. And we're here at the Musicland Concert Hall! I've been pretty busy here at the Musicland Concert Hall, trying to untangle these jumbled song lines. Before breakfast, I broke up bebop and blues that got bamboozled together in the balcony. After lunch, I pulled apart polka and punk rock, paired off in the orchestra pit. And I'm not having dinner till I divide disco from dubstep downstairs in the dining hall. I'm saying it has been a day. I still made time to check in on our friends Jedda and Koa, out in the Australian desert trying to fix the song lines. The way they're fixing the song lines is by following their own path, helping new friends and solving problems as they go. Every time they make some progress, all the song lines get a little less tangled. Now that you're here, let's see what they're up to. Jedda and Koa were waking up from a well-deserved nap. They walked all night, following their song line, and rested during the day under the shade of a tall rock. Tremolo, a thorny devil lizard who recently joined their little traveling band, greeted them at twilight, blinking his dreamy blue eyes. Jedda and Koa ate the food they were carrying with them. Tremolo hunted up some delicious ants. Once they'd eaten, they continued on their way, following the footprint in front of them and the jewel box star cluster that sparkled in the southern sky. I don't know if you've done much traveling in the desert. Me, I've been through the desert on a horse named... A horse named... You know, I think that was a horse with no name. Anyway, the thing about traveling through the desert is that it gets boring. I mean, boring. Boring like a 20-minute bagpipe solo. Think of the longest car ride you've ever been on. One where you were asking your parents, "Are we there yet? Are we there yet? Are we there yet?" every 2 minutes. Imagine you've got no phone, no video games, no books, not even any music to listen to. And then imagine that every time you look out the window, everything looks exactly the same as it did an hour ago. Now imagine you're walking. This was the state of things for Jedda and Koa. Walking and walking with nothing to look at. Those footprints kept appearing, and that star didn't seem to be getting any closer. There weren't even parents around to bug by asking, "Are we there yet? Are we there yet?" The second day of their quest, and our friends were feeling pretty discouraged. Then they saw something neither of them had ever seen before. Up ahead, galumphing across the sand, was a creature that was taller than the two of them would be standing on each other's shoulders. It looked like a light brown horse with a big old basketball tied to its back. I bet you know what animal I'm talking about. I bet that from the minute I told you we were going to have a story about the desert, you were waiting for this particular animal to show off its hump. And you were right. The animal Jedda and Koa saw was a camel. A dromedary, to be exact, which is a fancier way of saying a camel with one hump. But camels don't live in every desert on Earth. There weren't many camels in this part of the Australian desert. If this camel was in Queensland, either she was severely lost or something very funny was going on. But before that could get figured out, there was another problem. Jedda and Koa had never seen a camel before. So when they saw this funky-looking animal up ahead of them, they jumped to some strange conclusions.
Look!
Shouted Jedda.
A horse!
In her imagination, the footprints ahead of her turned into hoof prints as they sped across the desert on this horse's back.
Jedda and Koa ran toward the animal.
Koa was an excellent horseback rider, and as soon as he caught up, he tried to swing up onto the camel's back, only to bounce off her hump.
Ooh. Why is she carrying that on her back?
Koa asked. He reached up and tried to squash the hump down like a buzzer on a game show. Jedda was inspecting the animal's unusual face.
Why are her ears so small?
She asked, tugging on the camel's ears.
And where's her mane?
After suffering a few minutes of this, the camel huffed and stomped her feet. She looked back and forth, shaking Jedda and Koa so hard they toppled onto the ground.
That will be quite enough of that,
she said.
Jedda and Koa sat with their bottoms in the sand, staring in amazement. This weird horse could talk. Sorry, Mr. Horse,
said Koa.
It's not Mr. Horse, it's Ms. Camel,
said the camel.
And as a matter of fact, the name is Zinnia.
Zinnia wasn't from around here. The desert she was from looked a little like this, but there weren't as many strange rock formations. There certainly weren't any thorny devils like Tremolo, who seemed very proud that he was unique. Zinnia was wandering around one day when she came across some kind of doorway set into the side of a sand dune. She was curious, so she stepped through, and she ended up here. Wherever here was. Now, my ears perked up when she said that. Mysterious doorways, portals, if you will, kinda my jam. In addition to jams, as in music, and jams, as in jelly, portals are also my jam. Portals and jams are my jams. I nearly jumped into the story to tell Jedda and Koa that this sounded important. But then Jedda said, "This sounds important." So no jump in for me. Not yet, anyway. Zinnia could take them to the doorway if they'd hop on her back. It was less of a hop and more of a climb, with Koa boosting Jedda up first, and then Jedda yanking Koa aboard after, and finally Tremolo scurrying up Zinnia's hindquarters, which tickled so bad that Zinnia started to shake and nearly threw everybody off. But once they were all situated, Zinnia started off in the direction of the doorway. Koa noticed they were no longer following the jewel-boxed star cluster in the sky, which he used to guide him their whole first night of traveling. He felt bad about it, but sometimes you need to adjust your direction and find new stars to guide you. Or, camels to guide you. As she walked, she told them a story that their first encounter had reminded her of. The story was called The Old Woman and the Clarinet. There was once an old woman who lived her whole life in a little hut by the side of a small dirt road. She and her husband, who was a trumpet player, had raised their children in the little hut. But now the children were grown up and never visited, and her husband had passed away, buried with his trumpet, which was his most prized possession. One day, a truck went rumbling by on the dirt road, making the loudest noise the old woman had ever heard. Like 10 trumpets playing at once. Only the trumpets all sounded different from one another. The old woman watched from her window, covering her ears as the truck hit a big bump in the road, and something came flying off the back, landing on the ground in front of the house. Once the truck had gone away, and the noise was no longer blaring in her ears, the old woman went out to see what had fallen off the truck. There on the ground was a beautiful clarinet, glistening black in the green grass. Its keys sparkled with chrome in the sunlight. The old woman picked up the clarinet. She turned it this way and that, examining it. She said, "What a strange-looking trumpet." There hadn't been a note of music in the house since the old woman's husband had died, and she'd watched him play so many times she thought she would probably be able to play a mean tune herself. If only this trumpet weren't so out of whack. So she held the clarinet at both ends and twisted it into a loop, like her husband's trumpet. She pulled and tugged and bent it over her knee, and soon enough, the poor clarinet was tied into a knot. Next, the old woman looked at the clarinet's mouthpiece, the spot you blow into. A clarinet is a woodwind instrument, which means it has a reed that you rest against your lower lip when you play. The old woman didn't like the looks of that at all, so she pulled off the mouthpiece, which left just the opening for the barrel of the instrument. She put her lips to the opening and blew. The sound it made was less like music and more like, well, blart. Finally, she remembered that her husband's trumpet had 3 valves, while this trumpet had none. She went to the sink and took apart the pipes underneath, and then glued 3 tiny pieces of pipe to the twist in the clarinet. She put her fingers on top of the pipes and her lips to the opening of the barrel and prepared to play the first song played in the hut in years. All that came out was a mighty blat. The old woman was so frustrated, flummoxed, and fed up that she chucked the clarinet out the window. It landed by the side of the road. After a little while, that same truck, which had a band riding on the back, came by again. The clarinet player saw the instrument lying in the grass. The truck slowed down and she jumped out to grab it. Slowly and carefully, she untwisted the clarinet, fixed its mouthpiece, and removed the trunks of pipe. The clarinet played a song to show how relieved it was to be back to its old self. Jedda and Koa listened to the story, and when it was done, they apologized to Zinnia for thinking she was something she wasn't, and for trying to make her more like what they thought she ought to be. Zinnia accepted their apology. By then, they'd reached their destination. There in front of them, set into a big hunk of red rock, was a portal. It was an archway drawn into the stone, but not much else. Jedda and Koa were confused and a little scared. There were footprints in front of the portal. The 2-toed footprints of Zinnia exiting the portal, and 2 sets of human footprints, one Jedda-sized and one Koa-sized, entering the portal. Now, I have to let you all in on a little secret, but you have to promise not to tell Jedda and Koa. These footprints were from the future. That's right, they'd been here before, but in the future. How does it work? Jedda asked. Zinnia said that when she found it, it wasn't glowing or anything. But then, she heard a certain sound, a piece of music. One, I bet, went a little like this. With a tune on my flute, I was able to poke my head through the portal and say, "Hey," to Jedda and Koa. They remembered me all right, but it was strange to see me sticking halfway out of a hunk of rock. I stepped all the way through the portal and surveyed the situation, but Koa figured it out. The song lines were so jumbled that Jedda and Koa's song line ran out of our desert through this portal and back to wherever Zinnia was from. The question now was, would Jedda and Koa follow their song line through the portal, even though it might mean leaving Australia for someplace unimaginable? They could end up in Timbuktu or Tulsa. Koa hesitated. He missed his family, and he was frightened of leaving his desert. What if the stars were different? What if he couldn't find his way? Jedda patted him on the back.
Don't worry. Our song will show us the way.
And with that, they all stepped into the portal, bound for who knows where. Well, I know where, but I'm not telling. Not yet. Next time, Desert Discoverers. For now, Conductor out! Musicland Stories is a collaboration between Starglow Media and Double Elvis. Executive producers from Double Elvis are Jake Brennan and Brady Sadler. Executive producers from Starglow Media are Jed Baker and Agarenish A. Palmer. This episode of Musicland Stories was written by Bob Kroll. Alessandro Santoro is our showrunner. Narration by me, Nikki Lynette. Original score by Scott Janovitz. An episode mixed by Alessandro Santoro. Grown-ups, you can find more ad-free audio fun for the whole family by subscribing to Starglow Plus on Apple or wherever you listen to podcasts.